now like to say a few words about the much anticipated CEO panel. In opening this session entitled The Secrets of Business Success, I have to start by making a simple observation. Not all secrets are equal. When the secret sharers are individuals whose influence and track records of success are as stellar as today's panelists, you know you've come to the right place. I am now very pleased to introduce our moderator for this session, Ian Portsmouth. Ian is the publisher and editor of Profit Canada's best-read publication for owners and senior managers of small and mid-sized businesses. In 2008, the Canadian Society of Magazine Editors named Profit Canada's Magazine of the Year in its circulation category. In 2009, Ian conceived and developed the Canadian Export Achievement Awards, a national program presented by Profit and Export Development Canada. Ian is a trusted media commentator and public speaker on management issues and best practices of Canadian growth companies and is a passionate supporter of Canadian entrepreneurship. He is a three-time finalist of the National Magazine Awards and an editor of Marketing Masters, the best ideas of Canada's savviest marketeers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ian Portsmouth.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this great opportunity to be here at OCE Discovery 12, a fabulous event that I haven't had the opportunity to attend in a few years now. I can't believe how much it's grown, and Ontario is really blessed to have an event like this where so many entrepreneurs and innovators can congregate and share best practices, do some networking, and learn about all the amazing things that are happening in this province. It's my pleasure and honor as well to be moderating today's CEO panel. It's on a topic that is near and dear to my heart as the editor of Profit Magazine, and that is secrets of business success and management best practices. I will lead the discussion till about 5 or 10 minutes after 3 p.m., and then we're going to open the floor to questions. When we get to that point, I'll remind you that there are going to be microphones stationed around the room, and we'll ask you to line up at one of those microphones. I will take the first question from microphone number 1 up at the front and go in that order, so that if you want to be the first one to ask, make your way up to microphone number 1. I'd now like to introduce our panelists, and to my immediate left is Albert Lai, a co-founder of Big Viking Games, a social and mobile games company. Big Viking Games productions have reached over 30 million users across a number of platforms and devices. While in his teens, Albert sold his first internet company, My Desktop Network, in a cash transaction to Jupiter Media for 7 figures. More recently, he was the founder and CEO of BubbleShare, a photo sharing company sold to Caboose and Disney in 2007. He is now a co-founder of Contagion, an analytics platform tracking 1 out of every $4 spent in social games, where he also served as a member of the executive team, as CEO or president in the company's first 4 years. Contagion has raised more than $18 million from investors including the Facebook Fund, Altos Ventures, Maverick Capital, and Battery Ventures. Please welcome Albert Lai. In the middle is Kunal Gupta, the Chief Executive Officer of Polar Mobile, a leading software provider for digital media distribution. Polar works with hundreds of top-tier media companies around the world. A frequent speaker on the topics of digital media, innovation, and entrepreneurship, Kunal is regarded as a rising young visionary. He's also in the current issue of Profit Magazine. Kunal understands the potential of technology to transform the media industry to enable the next generation media experience for consumers. Kunal is the founder and chair of the board of Impact Entrepreneurship Group, a nonprofit organization focused on empowering the next generation of global entrepreneurs and leaders. Kunal has been recognized as a global citizen by the United Nations, as Alumnus of the Year by Shad Valley, and most recently as Ernst & Young's Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year. Please welcome Kunal Gupta. Sir Terry Matthews is the founder and chairman of Wesley, Clover, an investment vehicle and holding company. Terry has founded or funded more than 80 companies since 1972, including Newbridge Networks, a company he founded in 1986 and which became a leader in the worldwide data networking industry. In 1972, before launching Newbridge, Terry co-founded Mitel, a world leader in the design and manufacture of enterprise communications solutions. Wesley Clover now has interests in a broad range of next-generation technology companies, real estate, hotels, and resorts. In 1994, he was appointed an officer of the Order of the British Empire, and in the 2001 Queen's Birthday Honors, he was awarded a knighthood. In 2011, he was appointed patron of the European Cancer Stem Cell Research Institute. I'm very pleased to have with us Mr. Terry Matthews. I know many of the young entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs in the audience today want to hear a little bit about the backgrounds of these successful entrepreneurs. So I want to start with how they got into their first business, and I'll start with you, Albert. When you first got into business for yourself, what opportunity did you see, and what gave you the confidence to go for it?
It's primarily because no one wanted to give me a job that I wanted, more than anything. Obviously, being a young person, you want to do a lot, and for the lack of experience, it's difficult to get the jobs that you want. And being a child that grew into the internet in my late teens, it was an incredible time and space for us to run different types of experiments, many of which became a lot of the dominant computing and internet companies today. And for me, it was just simply because it was a passion of mine to get involved in building technologies, and starting a business just seemed like an obvious path to pursue that passion.
Back in the late 90s when you started, there weren't a lot of teenage entrepreneurs. What did your friends and family think about that?
It was interesting because I guess we became sort of poster childs for the first .com boom. Being in our late teens, just mucking around on the internet, we discovered that if we wrote stuff that people were interested in, we could sell advertising on it. And advertisers at the time were very willing to pay a lot of money for the page views that we're getting, and in doing so, we also got a lot of free hardware and software to review, so we really turned a hobby into a business. And for my parents and friends, I think we were a little bit of an odd situation, but I think it's now become very commonplace to see young people get involved in the internet and run global businesses, even in their late teens or early 20s.
Kunal, I don't know if Albert's story inspired you because you got into entrepreneurship a little bit after Albert. What inspired you to start your first business, and what gave you the confidence to do that?
Yeah, I mean, when I started Polar, and that was about 5 years ago, there were not a lot of young entrepreneurs. Out of curiosity, who here is under the age of, let's say, 30 years old and is involved with a startup or has started a company? So that's a lot more hands than would have risen 4 years ago. So when we started the company, we were right out of school. We just graduated from Waterloo Engineering. I think out of the engineering class of close to 1,000, we were probably the only guys that were starting a company right out of school. Parents thought we were crazy. Friends thought we were crazy. And we started a mobile business at a time when mobile was non-existent in this part of the world. Mm-hmm. And we've learned a lot along the way and had a lot of fun as well.
You launched Impact Entrepreneurship Group when you, I believe, were in your first year at University of Waterloo. David Johnson, now the Governor General of Canada, gave you a lot of mentorship and support. What sparked you to do that?
Yeah, we started Impact 9 years ago. And I've had a lot of support from guys like Ian and the great friends here at OCE. Impact is all about getting young people excited about entrepreneurship at a time when entrepreneurship was not cool, at a time when we hardly knew how to spell the word entrepreneurship, a time when you'd walk in and talk to guidance counselors and ask them, what are you telling students about entrepreneurship? And it was seen as a last resort. If you couldn't get into math or sciences, then hey, maybe you can go start a company or something. And you definitely see the appeal of starting a company and leading a company and joining a small company. And it's something that as a young person, and Terry will talk a lot more about this, the opportunity cost is lower than it's ever going to be. I've hooked on to that, Albert has hooked on to that, and I encourage all of you to hook on to that as well.
Terry, you're a former employer of Kunal, something you should be very proud of.
He worked out quite well.
Apparently he did, yes. There were some doubts. Tell us about your experience getting into entrepreneurship. You clearly have entrepreneurial DNA to the max. It is a passion of yours. You've started companies. You are just such an energetic supporter of entrepreneurs and an advocate for entrepreneurship in this country. Where did that come from in you?
I think engineering's kind of in the blood for some people, and so it really wasn't that very difficult for me. I borrowed $4,000 from the Bank of Nova Scotia. Thank you, Bank of Nova Scotia, if anyone's here. But they lent me $4,000, and boom, with a guy called Mike Copeland, who was best engineer I knew at the time, we started up a company called Mitel. And of course, that's reasonably good history. What perhaps isn't such historical understood is the bulk of the first people were new grads. And they worked for almost nothing because Mitel came up, or at least Mike and I came up with a program of ownership. And it's that ownership, I mean, that's the key really, because you now don't have employees working with you, you have owners. That's a completely different environment that you're dealing with. They want to know what's happening with the company. They want to know what sort of happens with clients and so on. And there's another thing, you know, some people should know that in universities they don't teach you how to sell. And without sales, you're a nothing. So some people have it in their blood that they have an ability to sell, and some people don't. So I have a passion for engineering, and I have an ability to encourage clients to buy. So the other issue is to connect with clients first before you develop something. So entrepreneurial people should understand from the get-go, connect with client requirements first before it becomes a speculative development. And if it's speculative, God knows, you know, what the end result will be. Probably typically the way investors find that out of 10 companies they invest in, 9 die. Well, in 90 companies, I've only ever lost 6. And you might say, well, Terry, I mean, that's an unbelievable ratio. How can you start up that many companies? First of all, it's an unbelievably big number of companies that, I mean, I don't think I know anyone else that's up to that kind of level, but it's belief in the young people and putting them together as a team. It's all about team. You have to get the team right. You have to connect that team with clients. And the end result, if you provide the right kind of guidance and funding, you get success.
And in working early on with prospective customers, you were essentially applying lean startup theory 40 years ago.
Well, that's right. But remember, if you connect with a potential client, it's no longer speculative, or at least you've dramatically reduced the speculation. It's those key items is working with young people, in particular the new grads, because they're typically not married, they typically no mortgages, no children, and so they can work 7 days a week, and they do. Isn't that great? Then you get a very hard work ethic.
Yes.
And then another advantage comes your way. You get first mover advantage. You come out with some product or solution, or you don't care, software or hardware or whatever, but you come out with something that, number one, you know clients want. And number two, you come out with something before low-cost Asian suppliers can take you on. Then you have to keep your foot right to the floorboards and keep with the lead. You take it any other way, I think you lose it.
Let me ask about a miscalculation you made earlier on in your entrepreneurial career. Can you tell us about a time, a mistake or a miscalculation you made, and what it taught you, what lesson it taught you that you've applied since then?
Well, I mean, the early learning, again, was like new grads, putting the right team together with a client requirement and then finding funding. But the funding, you don't need a monster pot. It's the team spirit. If you can get that team spirit, which comes with ownership, by the way, and that's a key element of the mixture. Mistakes you make, I think, that I've made, are often getting the team and the emotions not quite right. Because emotions have a huge part to play. When people work very hard, wishing to be entrepreneurs and gain ownership in a company and drive it very hard, you know, when people are in that environment, chemistries and emotions come into play. So the ability to guide those emotions in a manner whereby the things that are not, let's say, part of success have to be minimized.
You certainly have to pick the right
You
stock.
have to get those emotions right.
Yep.
And I'm sure the other CEOs here will find that they can relate to that, I would think,
Yeah, it's not.
How has life been for you in the startup environment?
Yeah, it's not easy in the sense that running a 6-person company is very different than running a 12-person, then a 20-person, and now we're 50 people. And these all sound like relatively small numbers, but within the company as a leader, the culture is totally different in terms of how you communicate with the team that you depend on day in and day out to help the company succeed, to deliver on client requirements. And when you're in a sales-oriented role, as many CEOs are, I'm in that boat as well, the amount of hours you have in the office with your team is actually limited. It's not 40 hours, it's not 60 hours, it's not 70 hours. Sometimes it's 8 or 10 hours in a week that you have to spend with your team because the rest of the time you're on the road, especially as Canadian companies selling abroad. So getting that chemistry right while scaling a company, delivering on client requirements while traveling on the plane 24/7 is not easy.
No, it's easy. I mean, absolutely disagree. It's very easy if you follow another little rule. Every quarter, like clockwork, you have to come out with a high-level report saying what the hell's going on. Then all the employees read it, and then you get alignment of interest. But that communication piece part, every quarter, like a sync pulse, you have to put the energy into getting that top-level view, and then in the report, which might be, 8, 10 pages, but you have to get depth in the report for those people in R&D, those people in sales, those people in marketing, those people in finance. You have to line them up. So it has to be absolutely like clockwork. Bang, 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 like a sync pulse. If you do that, you get much better chemistry, much better alignment. And by the way, when you get to the point needing an investor, there's the last quarterly reports. They say you put out a quarterly report. Good God, you're only a year old or 2 years old. And the other thing is to get mentorship by putting some older people, typically, an ex-lawyer, an ex-banker, or, whatever. But get those people that have been through things before on a board of directors. And then any investor will say, you're a year old or a year and a half old, and you have a chairman of the audit committee? And if that person is ex-Deloitte or ex-one of the big auditing firms, it's as if you put a seal of approval on the reports. It's called bench strength. You can increase the bench strength dramatically through boards and through advisory groups. And I mean, basically, you're often dealing with somebody that recently retired. They're fed up of insulating the roof, digging up the garden, paving the driveway, putting in a new fencing. They're fed up. So they're actually lucky to get out of home and say, I'm dealing with this new company, and they have contacts too.
Yeah,
so startup companies, sometimes they forget that. You can get a lot of bench strength by having senior business people on the board or the advisory committee. Has a huge impact on success.
And to put all of that in a nutshell, it's really about running your small new private company like a public company.
Exactly.
Preparing yourself for that next stage. Albert, what's been your startup experience in terms of some of the issues we've discussed here?
I want to echo what a little bit of Terry said. I think the idea of providing stock options is relatively foreign to employees in Canada. Quite often, I have to educate my employees to the value of the stock options that they receive and help them understand how to evaluate them and really understand what it means to be an owner of the company. And this is actually something that we do. We do quarterly reports to our employees. We look at entrepreneurship in part as talent architecture. We kind of see one of the primary pillars of our companies to be how do we create a culture where people can align themselves around some key core values. In fact, in this company that I'm running right now, Big Viking Games, the primary thing that I'm focused on, above the product, above making sure our finances are right, above pretty much everything else is getting the values right. Because I think that once you get the core values of the company embedded in the DNA of the people, and you get your employees to feel like they're owners of the company through their stock options, everything sort of falls.
No, but don't forget the quarterly reports. Don't forget the quarterly all-staff meetings. These are vital, like face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball. And of course, what you do as a leader, you reinforce yourself because then the rest of the staff say, well, this guy really knows what he's doing. And you use the report as the guideline for the all-staff meetings. I mean, from the earliest point, you have to do that. You have to be there and be seen as the leader and trusted.
Yeah, so we actually do a lot of that. We spent, actually just a couple of weeks ago, an entire half day on educating our employees on stock options, as well as presenting a quarterly report to our employees as if they were shareholders of the company.
Yeah.
And there are issues that come up, and there are definitely pros and cons, but I believe that if you provide sufficient transparency over time, the pros outweigh the cons.
Now, I'll tell you what I do, which is sort of a funny way of seeding the relationship that you might like. I actually seed within the client base, within the employees. I might take a secretary or might even be the CFO, but I mean somebody in the audience, and I'll say, I want you to ask this question. Because when you say, well, okay, well, I put the presentation on, any questions? If you're not careful, there's no questions because people don't want to stand out as not knowing what they're talking about. So seed some things. So, you know, you seed half a dozen questions. And on the first one, which is an awkward question, you say, well, that was a difficult question, but let me answer that. Then everybody says, well, that was a really tough question, but I mean, he just responded. And then you say, by the way, there's a camera as a gift for asking that question. And then somebody else will ask a question. You say, well, you know, and there's some sort of funny soft toy, you know, and everybody laughed, you know, because a little bunny or something. And then somebody else asks a question, but you've seeded it to start it up. You have to have that relationship strengthen and build. And if somebody, and always keep something horrible, like a pineapple. So you say, what's the pineapple for? Because there'll be some awkward son of a bitch in the group that says, Terry, I've got a question. Clink, 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 clink. You say, well, okay. Now, John, you know, that's a really, really tough question, but let me answer that. And there's a gift for you. Because when he opens it up, he said, it's a pineapple. So everybody laughs, and you say, well, John, you know, that was a tough question, a bit too tough. But the important thing is to break down the barriers and use even some funny schemes, like little fluffy dogs or whatever. But you have to get that barrier with the team. It's all about the team.
So we've gone into the area of human capital here, and we've addressed a little bit of culture. Employee culture. Can you please just quickly share how much attention do you pay to culture and cultural fit when you're hiring somebody, Terry?
Cultural fit. I mean, I don't know what you really mean by that, other than the fact that someone clearly has to be able to do the job. You have to make that distinction.
They share the same values.
Exactly. I mean, you know, if you're not careful, you might have someone in a startup where everyone has to work hard.
Right.
Where you have to walk on eggshells to keep them part of the team. You know, it's better not have such people, you know. Have some people who are tolerant. I typically explain, you know, if you think you bend down, that's not far enough. Bend down even more. You have to be very tolerant, and I'm sure you find that in a company, you know. People have to be tolerant and remember what the goal is. The goal is to have a successful company, not title, not position. It's actually to work together hard and make sure you get that success out of the company.
Kunal, two questions. So how are you hiring for cultural fit? And secondly, how are you managing with younger workers of Gen Y like yourself?
Culture is critical. I spend a lot more time on it now than I did 2 years ago. When we're hiring somebody, and when I'm interviewing somebody personally, I look for examples where they've worked as part of a team. And that could be a sports team, that could be an extracurricular, it could be in a past work environment, where they work closely in a team environment versus as strong individual contributors. The type of software we have, so many people are involved in getting the software to market that they need to be able to work well with each other. They need to trust each other and also be trusted. It is different, I guess, having a team of young people where our average age in the company is 26 or 27 years old. A lot of co-op students, I think out of the 50 people, only 4 of our employees have kids. So that kind of dictates the culture in terms of hours, in terms of team offsites, in terms of team socials, the mood at an all-hands team meeting, or at a hack day, or at an Friday afternoon social. And that's a culture that's helped us get to where we are today. It's not necessarily the culture that's going to get us to where we need to go.
Right.
When we look at scaling, bringing on different skills, more experienced roles into the company.
Albert, hiring for cultural fit and managing younger workers?
So we started this experiment recently. It's basically a force-rank survey of the 8 living values of Big Viking Games. And we ask our new hires and existing hires to force rank these 8 values. And what we're trying to do now is understand how successful employees in certain positions rank certain values versus employees that weren't so successful, and see if we can find ways in which we can get insights as to how somebody might play out as sort of a predictor of how likely they're going to work in an environment. So values and culture is super important. And this is something that I've, over the years, spent more and more time, learned to spend more and more time investing in. Because ultimately, I think that any startup success that I've seen today is predicated on your ability to attract the very best. And it's incredibly challenging because being in anywhere in the world, especially outside a hot technology bed like Silicon Valley, you're competing with a lot of much larger, much better financed companies that may even have better climates where they are. Mm-hmm. And so having an incredibly strong culture that when an interviewee comes to meet with you and your staff over a half day or a day-long interview process, if they are able to immediately see that people are different and unique and excellent, you're much more likely to get those top-tier people that will make all the difference.
Let's start with Kunal on this question. Kunal, you know that there are big American technology firms, the Microsofts, the Googles, that are aggressively recruiting young people in Ontario. What are you doing to make sure that people come to Polar Mobile instead of going stateside?
Well, yeah, we don't have the weather to work to our advantage there. You look at a school like Waterloo, which is the #1 recruitment school for Microsoft, for Google, soon to be Facebook as well. And now a lot of these companies are opening up development teams right here in Toronto. I spent a lot of times with other startup CEOs here in the city, and we talk about this. This is probably the #1 thing we talk about, is the fact that Amazon and Google, Facebook, Zynga, Salesforce are all setting up R&D teams in Toronto or in Waterloo, and they're going to probably pay engineers $20,000 to $30,000 more than what any of us startups can afford to pay them. We've put our heads together and realized that giving our teams an environment that is 50 people or 100 people and growing fast, and the amount of responsibility they're going to get at a company like Polar is far greater than what they would see at a large Silicon Valley B2C tech company. I think also the transparency and the involvement to be able to work with the CEO, work with the CTO, work with the founding team, and work with every single person in the company as they take products to market is something that's unique to a company of our size. So that's why we need to use our advantages and play them up versus focusing on their advantages.
Albert, Big Viking is located in London, Ontario, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Contagion's in San Francisco. What are you doing to make sure that you can attract the talent that you need in Ontario?
I spend a ridiculous amount of time speaking to university students and young entrepreneurs in hopes that we're able to build a positive brand with the various universities that we recruit out of. We also, like Kunal, try to play to our strengths. We try to provide for a culture of transparency. We try to promote the culture of ownership, employee ownership. We try very hard to provide access to the executive team. We've also tried to play to our strength in that we are a very fast-growing company where they can participate in our success from the ground floor and be able to grow very quickly with the company. So 6 months or less ago, we were 3 people. We're now closing out on 40 people. And so a lot of the people that were founding team members, some of them straight out of school are now in management positions because they've been forced to become managers in our rapid growth. And I think that also provides us with a unique advantage in terms of competing with the larger companies. And I think the other thing that is, I think is unique about being in Ontario is we're very close to an amazing talent pool in Waterloo, with University of Waterloo and University of Toronto. And in our business, being a mobile games company, we also require a lot of artists. A lot of our artists and animators come from Sheridan and a lot of Hollywood North type talent. So it's kind of an interesting mixture of things that have come together.
Terry, you're invested in several companies actively right now. How are those companies competing for the talent that might be lured to go to the United States?
I'm currently involved in 29 startups.
Yep.
I mean, all within the last sort of 4 or 5 years, you know. About 4 new ones a year, but yeah, I mean, I go into the universities, and I'm lucky to be relatively well known, and it's in the context of, let's say, putting on a presentation that I can demonstrate that I know what I'm doing, and lots of young people would like to participate in a startup and get ownership. So that's like a magnet in its own right, and we, you know, I agree with the other people on this panel that. You know, we are very lucky, really, to have such a talent pool in the province. Part of it comes with the way the government funds, you know. Canada generally is at the highest level of the OECD countries. This is the cooperative group of countries that compare. And in the OECD countries, Canada is at the highest end of the scale, the highest, in fact, of research in universities funded. So this means that the people are very talented. And so I find when I go and interview people for pulling together a new company, I mean, it's absolutely best in class worldwide. And you know, I'm in a good position to be able to compare because I hire people in China, in India, in England, in France. I hire people in the US and Canada. And so I'm in a pretty good position to compare. And so I agree with the discussion here. You know, we're very lucky. We have very, very talented new grads in this country. Then if you throw in a few things, one of the things that we didn't talk about that perhaps we should, you know, as dull as it sounds, year end. How would you like to be in a startup company where you have to work hard? We all agree that you have to work hard to drive and grow the business and so on. How would you like to have a year end at the end of December? Like, would that be Christmas and New Year's Eve? And you're asking people to drive and get those revenues up at year end? See, it's completely dumb.
Yeah.
And then if you do that, of course, the first quarter is the end of March. Would March break affect young families? Clunko. So, you know, move the year end, as I do, to either the end of February. My favorite actually is the end of April. And as silly as it sounds, just the year-end date has a hell of an impact on camaraderie, a hell of an impact on the team, because you avoid Christmas and New Year's Eve. Families like to have time off at that point, and you avoid the March break. I mean, if you have little kids and they're out of school, but you have to work towards the end of a quarter, or worse still, you know, the end of a year when you're trying to drive revenues and get clients to buy and so on. I mean, this is the startup environment. Mm-hmm. Crazy to have either a December year end or a March year end. Shift it. End of April. Makes a huge impact on the camaraderie that you get within the team.
That's incredibly granular advice, but I think Albert and Kunal,
yeah,
you probably haven't thought about that before.
No, I haven't thought about that. But
Has a
we will
huge
now.
impact, a massive impact.
They'll be declaring a change to their year end when they get back to the office
And
this
you can
afternoon.
do that once in the life of a company, shift the year end.
Right.
It's my humble advice.
Thank you, Terry.
OCE Discovery is about innovation. Let's talk a little bit about innovation, then we'll open to the floor to questions. How specifically do you drive innovation in your companies? I'll start from my end and go down to the other end of the panel. Albert, can you share a specific tactic or tool that you've used in any of your companies that you feel really helps you create great ideas or filter out the bad ideas?
One thing we've borrowed was specifically to bubble share that worked out really well, was borrowing the idea of 20% time, which is basically allowing our employees to do basically anything that they want that was in their heads that they wanted to add to the product. And a number of incredible features came out of the 20% time. Typically, it was a Friday afternoon or a Friday morning that they would start on it, and they would create something that they thought would be kind of cool, experimental, off roadmap. And what was great about that was many of those features ended up being the hook for us to get onto a lot of blogs for the product. And we actually got a number of TechCrunch articles that TechCrunch is a very well-read Silicon Valley blog about technology entrepreneurship that came out of those innovations that were completely off roadmap. And a number of them were directly related to how we ended up being acquired. And it was because a number of these innovations ended up on TechCrunch that then caught the attention of 2 of our 3 companies that eventually came to acquire or solicit from us for an acquisition. So I think it's interesting to think about how you might be able to decentralize, if you will, R&D in a small company by giving your employees the freedom to innovate on their own, on doing things that are completely off roadmap that you may not be able to justify if you were running your entire development team from a centralized perspective.
Of course, Google 20% time is one of Google's most famous management practices. 3M used it to develop, if I'm not mistaken, Velcro and the Post-it note. Quick question: how do you make that happen in a company? I mean, I think a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, or people in any profession wonder how you could possibly let your employees spend 1 out of every 5 hours doing something off of their core job. So how do you make that happen?
You have to hire incredibly carefully. I think that has been the consistent theme across all of my companies, that we're very, very, very selective and careful about hiring. And when you're careful about hiring and you're aiming to only hire the very best people, you have to trust your instinct and judgment, even if they seem to go against a lot of the things that you might have in mind about what you think the product should be. And you have to embrace failure as well. You have to encourage your team to do things that may or may not work. And if they fail, they shouldn't be punished. And accept the fact that the sort of failure is a necessary ingredient for success and innovation.
Kunal, how are you driving innovation at Polar Mobile? Do you have a secret of success?
Two things we've learned specific to the team. The first is about once a month we bring in a customer, and this would be an executive from a high-profile media company, to come have lunch with the team. It's a format not too dissimilar to this format here, where myself or somebody else essentially is interviewing one of our customers in front of the entire company, and the interview is quickly taken over by the team as they start asking questions. They ask a lot of hard questions to the customer, and questions like, where did we mess up on the last project? What else would you like to see in the product? Are you going out of business because you're a media company? But that's worked really well to give everybody on the team a face and a voice to the customer, and all the hard work they're doing, they understand where it's going and how it's helping solve bigger problems for our customer. The second thing, and this is top of mind because we just did this on Friday, is a hack day. So we give the entire engineering team the day off, so a different version of the 20%. They work together in different teams than the teams that they work on day to day. And they get a day to solve any problem they want, using any technologies they want. They get the opportunity to show it off to the entire company at the end of the day. We've got beer and pizza and a way to celebrate it. And what we quickly learned is that engineers, and I am an engineer as well, are extremely competitive. And when you give them a venue where they can show off their work and also compete against their friends and peers, they really get passionate about it. And we've seen in that one-day hack day, even the one on Friday, a lot of great ideas and concepts proven that I'm sure are going to make it onto our roadmap and help customers. And those are the same customers that we're bringing into the office.
Terry, where have some of the best ideas that your companies have produced come from?
It's a combination of things. I mean, I agree with this discussion here about putting a client. You know, engineers like to talk about what they have either done or about to do, and they often boast a touch, and maybe they say, oh, we can do that. Now they feel committed to get it done pretty damn quick. So the client interaction, that's exactly what we do as well. I throw in a few other things. You know, we talked earlier about the importance of bench strength with mentoring and board members. So the important thing, in my view, is to bring in people that meet at least once a quarter, certainly for quarterly review of the financials and progress of the company. But the more people you bring in that are mentors and or board members who are in that industry, they have their own network. I mean, I can't tell you how many times somebody on a board or a mentor, because of their advisory role, will say, well, you should talk to so-and-so who's the CEO of, you know, some company. And oh, sure enough, results in connection and boom, you get business. I do a few other things, which again are a little bit like clockwork. Every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. we get together with some clients or someone in the industry. I mean, this is a weekly thing, breakfast meeting, bring people around to listen to a presentation and again interact. Often that goes until about, you know, somewhere close to 9 o'clock because they've got another meeting or some such thing to get to. But every Wednesday I do that very early. And then the first Tuesday in every month, I run a Tech Tuesday, which is typically 5 to 7:30, and it's every month, same Tuesday, first Tuesday of every month, and that's almost like a social get-together. And then the other thing I do is I run a Founders and Funders once a year, and then a mashup once a year. So a little bit like, you know, syncing and clockwork, so people remember the dates. If you keep changing the dates and the location, you need consistency to keep that thing going. But it keeps it very active, very live, very interactive in terms of knowing what to do. And most important is that client connection we talked about. And you discuss, you know, you get a client in front of the engineering team, they like to say what they're doing. And that's really powerful.
We're going to open the floor to questions now. If you have a question, please proceed to one of the 6 microphones. We've got 2 here in the middle, 2 down that aisle, 2 down this aisle. When I see somebody at a microphone, it'll be your turn to speak. We have a question from microphone number 5. Go ahead, sir.
Great, thank you very much. Bruce Lazenby from Invest Ottawa. I've often heard it said that the most valuable asset any company has is the time of its CEO. Where do you CEOs spend your time? What's the most important thing in a week that you spend your time on?
Albert?
It's by far and away building a pipeline of great people. I'm always out recruiting. It's the #1 priority for me across the last 6 companies I've been involved in. I think ultimately companies, I mean, once you've set sort of a direction and you kind of know the problem set you're trying to solve, the balance is for the CEOs making sure the right people are in the company in the right spots. And then second to that is developing the talent and making sure that they're in the right spot and they've got the proper information. But the #1 thing is talent acquisition.
Kunal?
It's a little different. In priority, it's spending time with current customers to learn where we could be better, with future customers to learn where we need to be going as a company, with our leadership team. So with the key people on the team, I over-index how much time I spend with them. And I spend a lot of time representing the company externally, whether it's events like this, whether it's other parts in the world. And that's more from a broader aspect, understanding where the industry is going and opening doors and making connections.
Terry?
Yeah, well, if you've got a strong team that look after the day-to-day operations, in my case, like it's business development, a little bit like Kunal explained, you know, I mean, client, build a pipeline of activity with clients so you know where you're going. It's what the clients want. At the end, the team will want to know what that is. That's the driver for me.
In the companies you've founded, how long has it taken you to go from being intimately involved in day-to-day operations, decision-making, et cetera, to extracting yourself, whereas to the point where the company can run without you?
Typically, it's about a year, maybe a year and a half.
That's all. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
So Kunal and Albert, you're behind schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Question from mic number 1. Thank you.
Hi there. I just had a quick question about the importance of really bringing in the customer at the very early stage of when you're developing sort of a system to be able to actually sell to that particular customer, where you're really including them as much as you can to be able to make sure you can give them the best possible product that you can. So how involved should you be in with that? And when do you start talking about price and value and trying to actually sell them on it if you're a startup? And the second little part, I was wondering if Mr. Matthews could go into a little bit of detail in terms of this peculiar interview I saw through the Startup Canada website that was about this underwear or boxers and choice in underwear and how it made you a successful entrepreneur. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have to start with the underwear question. So, Terry?
I always wear boxes, and I don't feel uncomfortable in them. But as for, I start up companies different to the way you discussed. I mean, I wouldn't have a startup company doing a development without an upfront client requirement. So it's the reverse of that. I mean, most people start up companies because they believe they have a wonderful idea. They go along, develop a product, then try and sell it, and then find, well, you know, it doesn't actually sell as well as they'd hoped. That's always a tough thing anyway. And of course, if it doesn't sell well, they become emotionally attached. Now they work even harder, persuade more people to put money in and say, well, you know, I've got this going, that going. It actually is the wrong way. Because if you're not careful, it just goes down the toilet and gets more and more emotional, harder and harder work ethic. It's absolutely what I do not do. I go the other way. Make sure first that there's a client requirement and keep working with that client or clients to make sure you're on track. So I like the approach that Kunal talked about, you know, client, client, client. And the team has to be communicated so they know those client requirements.
I'll
very briefly, how early and how deeply are clients involved in product development for you?
Pretty deep. I want to tell a quick story, and hope you don't mind me saying this. So when we started the company, I went to go see Ian. This is 5 years ago now.
Yep.
And showed him the idea of a magazine on a BlackBerry device. This is before the iPhone existed, before Apple's App Store existed. And to show you how naive we were about publishing, the first question Ian asked me was, where's the advertising? And I said, that's a really good idea. And then that's how we inserted advertising into our products. And then he asked, how do you populate the app? And I said, how should we populate the app? And they explained to me how media companies worked. So that's a very simple example of how we got our start in an industry we knew nothing about, but very quickly we ramped up to understand how our customers work in terms of processes and tools, and we were able to fit very nicely into that.
And now Kunal is eating our lunch in the mobile space. So be careful who you talk to and what you tell them.
Albert? I'm going to chime in on the consumer, business-consumer internet space. And I agree with what everyone else here has said, but the one thing that I'd add to that is if you're going after a B2C space, be very data-driven. I think it's incredibly important for you to understand how users are using your product by making sure that you're instrumenting your products in such a way that you can glean insights from them, from the usage patterns, try to glean how viral the product is. Is this something that propels itself from user to user? Are you split testing every possible logical and intelligent option along the path to monetization? Are you thinking about engagement and retention as you change different features in your product? Are you split testing your monetization path and pricing? So if you're dealing with something that is more B2C, I think that's incredibly important. It's often overlooked.
We're going to go to 2, and then 3, and then 5. So mic number 2.
Hi, Eric Williams, Orange Monkey Media. My question has to do with off-site workers. So often in these web businesses, you end up working with people who aren't sort of like on-site, on-hand. So what tips can you provide to sort of like make sure you're kind of getting the most value out of those kind of employees?
Any suggestions?
Well, it's an individual thing. I mean, Some people may have history working with you before, in which case there's a trusting relationship there, you know. At the end of the day, I mean, it isn't as good as having a core team close together. You know, it's an interesting thing in life, but most people here may not appreciate, but 70% of communication is not verbal. Not verbal. So, do I see you? How did you respond? It wasn't so much what you said, but the fact that we had visual connection and we can see each other and talk together. So, you know, but I mean, the world of technology is changing. So, you know, these days, video-oriented things, you could put on a 60-inch TV and it can be on all the time, and we could be seeing each other all the time as if we were in the same office. And those things are changing the environment that we all live in. But don't forget, 70% of communication is nonverbal. So, again, chemistry, how is the other party behaving, and so on. Personally, I find the video side to be a vital piece when I have a partner going with me.
Of course.
Irrespective of where they are.
Albert, Kunal, anything to say about remote workers? You don't use them. Is that by choice?
I'm actually the remote worker in the company.
Okay, you're the remote worker.
I'm in New York and London, and I'm all over the world. So I stay in touch with people on the team constantly and calling them at all times of the day whenever I need them or they need me. I'm not shy to pick up the phone and call people.
Yeah, I'm with the video conferencing piece. I think it's really important if you have multiple offices, especially when we had an office in San Francisco and Toronto, we had a live feed always on that allowed people to see, even just seeing somebody walk down the hall in the other office just brings you that much closer together. And we try as much as possible when we're doing conference calls or one-to-ones to encourage video because of the nonverbal cues that are given off.
Thanks for your question. Number 3, thanks for waiting.
Hi, Kevin Carroll, Invest Ottawa. This question's for the entire panel. Albert touched on the importance of failure, and I wonder if each one could talk about a past failure that they had and some of the key learnings and takeaways that they had from that.
Great question. Albert, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so of the 6 companies that you guys have heard about, there's probably 40 more that no one's ever heard about because they're all failures. And I think it's incredibly important for Canada especially. I think we could definitely do a better job of embracing failure as an ingredient in success. This is something that I think is done incredibly well in the Valley. When I was there, it was really worn as a badge of honor, and I think that, you know, it's something that I've seen in my companies where, you know, with Contagion, we started as a hardware software company. We made 3 pivots before we figured out that we wanted to be an analytics platform. I think that's something that I've almost seen time and time again. It's a theme where you start off in one direction, but you almost, at least from my experience, you always end up somewhere else. I hope that, you know, for aspiring entrepreneurs out there, that you keep that in mind. That your first idea, don't get married to it. You're almost always likely to end up somewhere very different.
Kunal, failure and something it taught you?
Focus, the lack thereof. It is so easy as a young entrepreneur with all of the ambition, and you're so naive, you think everything is possible, which it almost is, to go after different verticals, different geographies, different problems for customers. And our first 18 months, we were not focused as a company. And looking back, it all sounds so simple, what we needed to do to get to where we are. But then we look at all the other things that we did that weren't on the path that we took, and we realized, hey, we would have benefited a lot from being much more focused early on.
Almost 100% certainty that these comments made are correct. You know, I mean, in all the companies I've started up, the original direction, you get changed to a different direction on the basis of client input, probably from what you started doing, and at some point you say, good God, that's much, much better, and you just shift.
Thank you. So we have a question from number 5, and then we'll get to 4, and that might be all the time we have. So go ahead.
Hi, thanks. My name is Neha, and I'm from the University of Western Ontario. I'm a Master's of Engineering student. My question is regarding the research part that you were talking about concerning all of the individuals at universities who are very talented. what I'm wondering is, and I understand this is on a person-to-person basis, but can you maybe touch on why a lot of my friends or a lot of students I know who graduated from engineering don't have jobs, or they have to settle for something that isn't even engineering, and they may have to, you know, do something lower level as that's not really as technical or isn't technical at all?
I feel their pain. I have a philosophy degree.
Terry, you could take
Terry,
this
what
one.
would
Well,
you like
okay,
to
I
say
mean,
about
this is a good question. I mean, maybe they're asking for too much money or expecting too much. You know, at the end of the day, if you're entrepreneurial and you take risks, and by the way, I take risks. I don't take stupid risks. I always take a look at whatever the environment is. If I can't live with it, well, I just don't do it. If I can live with it, but it's a risk, then I'll go for it. Some people are risk takers, some people are not. Some people get jobs, some people won't get jobs. I mean, the world is full of young people that can't get jobs. So, I mean, I don't know how to answer this question. Some people, I mean, I started a company up with $4,000. It wasn't exactly a lot of money. It was highly risky. But, you know, once you're into it, hard work ethic, camaraderie with some people that were of common thought. And by the way, some mentors, people that can throw in time without actually taking any money. I mean, why does it have to be money? Sometimes it doesn't take money. You know, a team can be a winning team, not necessarily with a giant pot of money. And I'm sure I mean, both of you probably found the same thing, you know. It's, I mean, what is it about? Taking risks can be fun.
you guys both created your own job, right?
I got a short answer for you. Unemployment is often the mother of many startups. So, you know, like if you got nothing to lose, it's a great, being unemployed is a great place to be, because you can go and you can start something, and even if you fail, you just end up at the same spot.
But you can't go much lower.
You can't go lower.
Much lower.
My quick 2 cents is you're doing the right thing by coming to a place like this. You know, I have a personal connection to every single person on this panel, and I probably haven't spoken to any of you in a couple of years, but here we are together. So it's going to things like this and putting yourself out there as a personal risk, exposing yourself, networking, and making new connections is what I've learned has helped.
What is it? It's all about having a go, right? You have a go and make a stab at something. Create a little heat.
There you go. Last question of the day from number 4.
So hi, I'm Rohan Mahimkar from smartteacher.ca. Now, we are a fairly new company, and I know you touched on this a little bit, but we've hired our first couple employees since January. How do you encourage, train, and guide these employees to become managers, to become self-sufficient, and to really train some of the junior employees in the company?
This might get back to my question about managing younger workers. So are they coming to you with the skills that you feel that they need, and how are you training them? Albert?
This is going to sound a little odd, but I think one of the things that you want to do with your early employees is to train them to be CEO. Train them to do everything and anything that you would do or would want to do or may not want to do. And one of the most difficult things in being a CEO, in my opinion, is learning how to say no. Kunal talked about this a little bit. You know, young employees, young students or graduates coming out, they think, you know, the world is their oyster, there's infinite possibilities. Because there's infinite possibilities, it makes it incredibly difficult to say no. And by saying no, you're able to narrow your focus. And I think that's something that I try to train my early employees to do is how to say no and focus.
It sounds funny. It took me a few years to figure this one out. Because I'd always sit there trying to guess, what do my co-founders, what do our early employees want to do? And only until recently I started sitting down with them and just asking them. And it sounds really funny. Just ask them, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a manager? Or do you want to be a team lead? Or do you want to be a strong individual contributor? Our CTO, one of the smartest guys I know, has no direct reports. He sits on the management team. He solves some of the hardest problems in the company. He helps with architecture and design. But all of the engineering development team does not report into him. And 2 years ago it did. And that was a mistake that we had made because I was guessing that's what he wanted to do. He thought that's what I wanted him to do, but it's not what he wanted to do. So literally just sitting down with your key people and asking them, where do you want to go in your career? And showing that you're committed to helping them get there pays dividends.
And are there ever any instances when you tell them that's probably not the right place for you?
Yeah, not in those words, but that's where you coach them to something where you both agree they can be successful at.
Great. Terry?
Well, it's in communications with the team, really. I mean, for a company to grow, it goes through different levels, whether it's $1 million a year by revenues, jump to 10 or 5, and then you go through 20. I mean, this is an ongoing job to keep the team at the right sort of expertise, right motivation, and always be open to bring people in that are right to grow the company. And it's that activity. It's a never-ending thing, really. You can't say, well, it's month by month or quarter by quarter. It's daily. You have to stay on it all the time. And in particular, you have to keep the chemistry of the team motivated to reach those goals and become successful. So create goals. That's always good. A little baseline of what you expect for the year. Monitoring it each month, each quarter. Keep looking at the team members. But the communications with team members, I think, is vital, which is the point you make.
We have a hard stop to get to very shortly, so I do want to apologize to those of you who did not have an opportunity to ask a question from the floor. I have one final question for the panelists, and it's this. You've all built at least one, sometimes many, successful international businesses out of this province of Ontario. What has Ontario given you? What kind of platform has it given you for launch and growth? Albert?
So prior to starting Big Viking, I got to spend time in close to a dozen technology hotbeds. Last company was based out of the headquarters in San Francisco. I chose Ontario because out of all the countries and provinces as well that I could have set up business in, Ontario had by far the best combination of technical talent especially technical talent to founder ratio, creative talent. From a game developer perspective, we got a 5x the per capita of game developers as the United States. And then finally, Canada has the best tax credits for both R&D and game development through the OIMDC. And out of all the provinces in Canada, Ontario has the best game tax credits in the world. So it was really a no-brainer for me to set up shop here between getting great creative talent, great technical talent, and great government support. And quite frankly, I have in the past been quite critical of Canada's lack of support for entrepreneurs. But at least in the game sector and new media, it's incredible the amount of support and talent that we have in Ontario. So I commend what the Ontario government has done for at least game developers like ourselves.
Kunal, you've expanded internationally. Why Ontario is a place to headquarter your company?
Yeah, so if you were to ask my co-founders and early team, they'd say because you didn't pay us anything and we all had to live at home. Although we wanted to go somewhere warmer. This is easy, 3 reasons. I mean, Albert hit on 2 of them, talent and government incentives, and the third one for us is early customers. Our early customers in Canada are big enough to drive revenues and for us to start our company off their back without them realizing it. And they are recognizable enough in the US to get our footing, and that's where we scale outside of Ontario. But access to great talent, government incentives, and enough of an early client base to prove our vision, prove the product, to then scale off of it internationally.
Terry, I believe before you came here this afternoon, you had a constructive conversation with Minister Duguid, if I'm not mistaken. Why Ontario for Mitel, for Newbridge? Wesley, Clover has a lot of investments here. Why Ontario?
Well, first of all, there's great talent in the province. If you don't have talent, then you have to go somewhere else. So there's a great infrastructure here. The universities are excellent. The talent is absolutely first class. But then there's a quality of life. There's security. You don't get mugged everywhere you go on the streets. I mean, there are places with better climates, one could argue, but then I would say that's not correct. You can't live on a park bench in Ottawa in January. You can't, like, it doesn't equate. You have to go somewhere warm. So the truth is, it's a very clean environment. It's a great place. You're safe. The standards of living, the quality of life is first class. This is really tough to beat, I've got to tell you. Really, really tough to beat. And if you're in the high-tech business, it's the quality of the engineering and the scientists and the computer science, so on. I mean, we really have a great environment here. No question about it.
I know you have all sorts of ideas out on how we could make the environment better, but we don't have any more time. Please, a round of applause for our CEO panel, Albert Lai, Kunal Gupta, and Sir Terry Matthews. Thank you very much, gentlemen.